It turns out that you can't heal a wound by not looking at it or by saying it's not there. So this is part 2 of our butterfly conversations. Welcome. In part 1, we talk about the most transformative dream that I had 2 years ago on 11/11. In that video, I vaguely mention the story that led up to that dream. But honestly, it's a tough story, and I have struggled to figure out the best way to tell the story. And I think that's a very real problem of figuring out how to give our tough stories a voice. For 27 years, I was in the dark, hiding, and I referenced that in the last video. But I never said what I was hiding from or from who. It's a part of the story that I have been avoiding, quite honestly. When I was a teenager, I was in an abusive relationship with a teenager boy, and it was the summer before 9th grade when I met him. I was at this, it was kind of like Boys and Girl Scouts of America, but a religious version of that. And I was in that, and I met a boy there, and things were normal. And, it was my first real serious relationship, I guess. There were some, red flags, as they say. When you look back, you can always be like, well, I guess I could have sort of, noticed this or this or this. When you are in a relationship, if you start to see some red flags, they start to add up. Pay attention. So they started to add up. I don't want to go too much into who he was for his own privacy issues. I guess you should know that he had his own trauma, as we all do. And while we were dating, it was in the second year of us dating, his father died while they were surfing together. And this kid had to give his father mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and his father died, and it was really traumatic for him. So this kid who was already showing some red flags of being a little controlling and possessive, reactive, those kinds of things, he kind of really lost it, obviously, when his dad died in that kind of way, in his face, literally. And I understood that. And I think part of being a sensitive person, an empathetic person, we empathize a lot of times with the people who hurt us. Also, families who know someone is hurting someone else, we empathize. We know where that person came from. So it was really kind of easy for me while I was in it to be like, well, yes, he's giving me red flags, and yes, he's being somewhat controlling and somewhat mean to me, but he just lost his dad. And it gives you an understanding of why maybe you're being abused a little bit, which isn't right, but just it is, I think, how people are. It's not okay, but it just, you live with it. And that's what was going on. And I wasn't telling anyone. I was not talking to my friends about it, although they had a feeling. I was not talking to my parents about it, although my dad at least now says he had a feeling. I guess so even today, that's why it's hard to talk about it. I've spent a really long time not talking about it, as I'm sure you feel the same about your hard stories. I don't really need to go into the trauma that happened between me and this boy, but what you do need to know is that it accumulated over time, as trauma often does. I got more and more afraid, and I got more and more in my head, and I got more and more small and weak, and I got more and more fearful of everything, honestly, everything. Everything that had been safe didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe even with myself. I didn't trust myself. It was control. It was emotional abuse. He would definitely get really upset with me when I would even attempt to tell the story, or even attempt to, even when I would draw, he would shake me and yell in my face and get very angry with me that I was even telling a glimpse of this story. The story, I guess, more than even all the traumatic stories, because like I said, they add up. How do I choose which one to tell you? There's just so many. But the one that really gets me is the catalyst right before I got out. He and his mom were in a fight together. They were pushing each other and threatening each other. And he turned around. As he turned around, she hit him in the back, like right in the middle of the back. So he turned around and he pushed her against the door, the back of her front door. He just had his energy against her, and he just put his fist up and he said, "Hit me again, bitch, and I'll shove my fist down your throat." And at the same time, while that was happening, I was in the corner of the living room, in the same room, with their dog, Ichabod. Me and Ichabod. We were like watching this whole display. I mean, I literally can remember I was wearing a white shirt and it had a peace sign on it, coincidentally, because I was about peace. And I remember looking at the dog's face. I remember watching them fight and then holding the dog, and the little weenie dog. And right then, the mom turned and looked at me as he was still holding her, and she looked at me. It was like from a movie. I mean, I couldn't make this up. She looked at me and she said, "Take a good look, Shannon, because this is how he's going to treat you." And that was a pretty real message. I'm not going to lie. I saw it play out. I felt it in the room. And that moment was the moment I began to plan my way out. And I was 17 and a half. If there's one thing I could truly remember about that time, it's that so much more was going on in my life than any adult in my life knew. And that is the one big thing. It's like so much was going on, and it was heavy, and I didn't know where to put it. When you're taking on something heavy, where do you put it? So for me, I had two places to put it. My journal, I put it there. And on some paper, I put it there. And that was I was already doing a lot of writing and drawing before that relationship. But during that relationship is when art became my catalyst for healing. It's where art became the place I output it and I outlet it. It's the place that I felt I could then look at it because it was no longer trapped inside of me. So last night when I was preparing for this, I was going to pull some old artwork. I went into what I call the vault, which is where I keep all of my old artwork. I was thinking about what ways was I using writing and art. Those were my outlets. So I grabbed my old journals and poetry books. I used to write a lot of poetry. And I found this book, poetry book. And in it, there's a poem. And it was shocking because you know how it is when you look at old journals, you have such a vague recollection of even writing them. I don't really remember writing this poem, and it was super crazy because it's titled Butterfly Dreams, and that's what we're talking about. And I wrote it right before I got away, so I wrote it right about that same time I was beginning to plan my escape. So I wrote this on October 1st of 1991. It's so crazy. Butterfly dreams. Colors brilliant, butterflies soar. Without their wings, they are no more. I die too without my wings, trapped alone by demon beings. How then can I fly? Bound by scarlet thorns, cannot escape where blood adorns. Tears are falling, highs and lows, voices won't let go. How then can I fly? So afraid they'll never leave. Crazy, I've been deceived. They give no warning, can never tell. They enter me, my silent hell. How then can I fly? I've done my penance. What more do they want? They took my wings, yet still they haunt internal war. How can I fight? I will give in. Just give back my flight. But then will I fly? Go. Get away from me. I've laid down my weapons. Please set me free. Nothing left but butterfly dreams. Two creatures deprived of their delicate wings. But soon I will fly. I scream out inside. I cry. I hide. It's in my eyes. I've died. Now I can fly. Now I will fly. Just like in art, we protect ourselves. We protect the ones we love from our hard stories. And so often, I think even our hard stories are almost even harder when we think about our friends and our families, that we have to tell them what we've gone through, because we empathize with them too. We don't want them to have to process. We've already had to go through it. Why would we make them go through it? And so we just give a lot of evidence to ourselves as to why maybe it's just better to keep it to ourselves. But I'm here to tell you that we need to normalize talking about hard things, because if we could embrace that in each other and know that we're here, we're all in this together, like especially us women. I mean, we've gone through this together. This is everyone's story. Rather than trying to say, don't let them win, don't hold that. That's all good advice, but the problem with that is that healing takes time, especially a deep healing. The deeper the wound, the longer the time it takes to heal. So it's really discomforting when you're in it to have people tell you to heal faster, because healing takes how long healing takes. Until we can look at it, we can't fix it. Until it's in front of us, we can't see it. And that's why we have to get it out and look at it. It's so important. And I mean, underneath here, I have a painting that I made while I was in that relationship. I hadn't seen that painting. I found it last night. Haven't seen it in a good 15, 20 years. So underneath here, I'm going to give you just a couple seconds with this painting. I don't think you need more. For 27 years, I lived in fear. And for 27 years, I believed that this person was going to come for me. This was not me being paranoid. This was because he told me when I was 19 years old, he said, I'd finally gotten away from him. And he called me and said, someday when you least expect it, I'm going to show up at your door. When you're married and you have children of your own, I'm going to show up. And I'm going to make you keep your promises to me. And that's what he said. And I believed him, because you believe someone when they say that kind of thing. And so I lived in fear. I ran my whole business in fear. I played very small. I didn't want to be found by him. And so I spent the first half of my life not being found by him. That was my only focus. I didn't really want anything. I didn't wish any harm on him. I just wanted him far away. Like, I didn't want any problems. I had grown past the sadness, and I had grown past the fear a bit. At least I thought I had. And I didn't think about him. He lived in another state as far as I knew as we grew older. I went up, I got married, I had a child, I changed my name, I went to college, I did all these things. And so as time went on, I just thought, well, you know what, he's probably forgotten about me and it's fine. Until not that long ago, I would say it was 12 years ago maybe, he contacted me, and those feelings were all over again. Because it was a validation that he didn't forget about me. Every night I stayed late at my art studio, I wondered if he was in the parking lot when I would get out. Every time I would lock my door at my art studio, I would watch my back for him, looking for him. I never kept my business open. I always kept it very locked. Everything was very locked and barred because it wasn't a question of if he was coming, it was just a matter of when. And I, with all of my heart, believed it would happen where we would face off and one of us was going to go down. I just didn't know which one it would be, but one of us was going to go down. Because I was going to go, the second time, if he ever came and confronted me again after all these years, this time I was like, I'm not getting pushed down this time. This time I'm fighting. I'm not running, I'm fighting. So now that you kind of know who I was running from, what I was running from, the part that comes full circle is the dream. The weekend of that dream. 11/11 was on a Sunday. Friday was that weekend, the 9th. And I got a message from a girl from my school, from my childhood, saying that someone that we both know had been in an accident and he was brain dead, and his family was with him and they were going to be pulling him off of life support. And even though obviously I never wished death on anyone, I never did. I really thought it was over all of that. I really, truly did. And I didn't know until the night of 11/11 when I had that dream and I flew. And in the first video, I talk about like how I've had that non-flight flying dream since my teenage years. Well, I just kind of didn't tell you this whole other part from my teenage years. And so that night of 11/11, I went to bed knowing that he was pulled off life support that day. And so when I showed up in that hallway in the dark in my dream, just like every time before, and I ran straight towards the dark, and I lifted up, and I saw light, and I saw a lady. She had the look that said, "You're free. I knew you could fly, and now you know you can fly." When I woke up on 11/12, the morning after, it was the first time in 27 years he was not coming. I honestly thought so many years had passed. I honestly thought, yes, it was a wound, but I honestly felt like I was pretty over it. Because that's what happens. We get used to living with the hard parts of our story. We get used to that. It feels like our normal. It feels regular. We can hardly feel it. I didn't know until it wasn't an option. I didn't know what that would feel like. I couldn't have known. And so it's kind of not fair for me to tell you the first part of the dream and not tell you this part of the dream, because what happens is you on the other side, maybe you're still running, maybe you're still hiding. And it's not really fair for me to be on this side and tell you, well, just unfurl your wings. Just fly. Just don't be afraid. That's not fair, because that's not what happened to me. I lived in fear until it was not an option for me. I couldn't even do that for myself. I didn't know how to get it off of me. I did the best I could. I lived my life as best I could and didn't look back. But what I didn't know is it was crumpling my wings. It was keeping me low to the ground. I was listening this morning to, Glennon Doyle. She was on Super Soul Sunday, and she did a beautiful talk that is, it's called First the Pain, Then the Rising. If you have a chance to go listen to that, you should, because it really resonated with what I was talking about. And she talks about being in the hot loneliness. And the hot loneliness of now is how she calls it. And I think that is just so poignant, because being in the cocoon, being in the dark, being in the pain, being in the wound, you are sitting in the hot loneliness of now. And in that is what she says, you'll have opportunities when you're in that to have out buttons, that you can get yourself out of being in the hot loneliness of now, because we don't want to be in it. We want to, whatever we can, to not be there. We're going to choose that. But she says, no, you got to stay in the hot loneliness of now, because that is where you are transforming. And that's what we're talking about. That's where you are healing. That's where you're fixing things. So, one question that's come up for me a few times since I've told this story is, what would I do differently? And I think that's a great place, because I definitely want to speak to anyone who might still be there. What can I tell you that might help you get out of the hot loneliness of now? And what I would do differently is exactly what Glennon Doyle says to do also, is to don't run. Don't run from the darkness. Don't run from your pain. Don't run. That is what I would do differently. I would not run from the darkness. Instead of trying to avoid and protect and run from the pain, what if we actually help our friends and family? We push them towards the pain. That was what she said. What if we actually say, oh my gosh, honey, I'm so sorry. This pain is your pain. Go! Because guess what? That pain is really bad, but guess what? Your courage is even stronger than what that pain is. So go, you got this. This is your pain. Face it, head it on. And I just think there's so much strength in that. And, when I start to think of what changed for me, where I stopped running, it was me showing up in that dream for 27 years in that hallway. Me showing up in the dark and running towards what I couldn't see and running towards the unknown. That's what I would do differently. I would not just face my fear, but I would get my strength and muster it up and run straight towards my fear with as much confidence as I could bolster. And do you know what cures fear? Action cures fear. Get that healing process started. You just got to keep tending to it. At first, it's really hard to look at it. It's really hard. But you got to. You got to clean it out. You got to look at it and clean it out. And then you got to be willing to come in the next day and you got to look at it again and clean it out again. And as you keep healing a wound, it starts to look different. And something I've said for years is that our pain is part of our purpose. We got to be willing to look at the ugly stuff. And we got to be willing to talk about it and face it and change it and heal it. So wherever you are in your healing, there's different phases of healing. Whatever part you're in, I just want you to know that it's where you're supposed to be. There's so many parts of healing. Just like being in the cocoon, there's so many parts to it. You just need to be able to, take the time that you need. Take the time that you need to heal. But that's it. We're not going to stay in it. We don't stay in the wounds. It's important that we acknowledge them. We need to acknowledge them. Sometimes our pain is meant for us, but sometimes I think we stay in our pain longer than we need to. And a part of pain is not staying in it too long. When we go to get a surgery from a hospital, you get wheeled into recovery after your surgery. You don't stay there. You don't stay in recovery. If you're in it and maybe you're figuring out your exit plan, just know that. Just know that it's okay. Once you figure out it's not for you, leave. You will come out of it. there is an opening. There is light. You just can't see it yet, but it's there. Just because your wings are broken does not mean that you can't fly, and does not mean that you won't fly. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here and for sitting here with me through this conversation, a hard conversation, one I've been waiting for a really long time. So thank you. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Ciao. Bye.